Solo female travelers, this episode is for you.
Here's a 30-second teaser of this episode.
I do not feel more unsafe traveling by myself than I do being by myself in the United States.
I definitely tend to book all female dorms at hostels, which helps a little bit if you're feeling nervous about safety.
Make sure that your flights are arriving in a new place and even your trains if you're traveling within a country during the day as opposed to at night.
Just because you're solo doesn't mean that you can't find a buddy and really latch on in a
Right.
situation where you maybe want to feel a little bit more safe. Solo female travelers, this episode is for you. We're going to discuss the ins and outs of solo traveling as a woman, the most important things to know, how to prepare, how to stay safe, and some of our own solo travel stories. Welcome to the Travel Lemming podcast, where we talk all things travel with our team of travel writers. I'm your host, Laura. I'm a senior travel writer here at Travel Lemming. I'm joined today by my co-host, Sky, who I'll introduce in a moment. But first, I just want to thank Tortuga Backpacks for sponsoring this episode. My co-host today is Sky Ariella. She's a senior travel writer with Travel Lemming and a full-time traveler with lots of solo travel expertise. She has written hundreds of articles for us as well as for other travel magazines. Welcome to the podcast, Sky. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Where are you located right now?
Right now, I'm in the United Kingdom with my dog, Bear. We've been here for a few months, and I think our next stop is going to be Portugal, probably.
Amazing. I'm calling in from the San Francisco Bay Area. So you have a lot of solo travel expertise, and I just want to start by asking, where was the first ever place that you solo traveled?
For sure. My first solo trip was actually my very first trip out of the United States ever. When I graduated from college when I was 22, I took a one-way flight to Thailand and by myself, but it turned into 6 months of solo traveling around 6 different countries, I think. And I got hooked. After that, I loved solo traveling and travel in general.
That's amazing. That's such a long way from the United States, especially for your first trip out of the country at all. What kind of inspired you to do that?
So I had always wanted to travel internationally, but I had really never had the opportunity to do it growing up. And I started watching a lot of YouTube videos when I was in college of people just traveling around, and I was so enticed, and I had my mind set on that once I graduate, I'm going on this trip, and it just kind of unfolded like that.
Going when you're young is such a good time to do it just because the lack of responsibility that you might have compared to other points in your life. My first solo trip was also in college. The summer after my freshman year of college, I signed up to go volunteer as an English teacher in Croatia. So I signed up completely on a whim, just was like, again, same thing. I'd always wanted to travel. I saw an opportunity and I took it. And I went with a group of other volunteers, but I didn't know anyone beforehand. So it felt like a solo trip because I was the one that was bringing myself to do that. But then when I was in the country, I did have a point of contact in the country. I had like other Americans that were kind of around me. So that was really, really nice. And I just had the best time. I lived in Croatia for 2 months. I lived in a little community on the coast and then one inland as well. And then afterwards, I went backpacking through Slovenia with 2 of the girls that I had met while in Croatia. And it was just such an eye-opening experience and definitely got me hooked on travel. What are some things that you feel like you got to know before you take your first solo travel trip?
I think one of the biggest things to know before a solo trip is just keeping in mind that everyone feels uncomfortable and it is a very nerve-wracking experience before you embark on it. So the nerves are normal and it doesn't mean you shouldn't go on that trip. It doesn't mean that it's going to be horrible. It's just something that you have to push through to get to the amazing experience. And similarly, there are moments when you feel homesick or like it goes in waves and it's not always constantly fun. But overall, it is a beautiful experience. And even the bad days teach you something useful.
Yeah, completely. I mean, before I left for Croatia, the month leading up to it, I was like, what have I gotten myself into? I don't want to go. And then I'm so glad that I pushed through that. How do you feel about being type A versus type B while traveling? So planning every single aspect of your trip out in advance versus just booking a one-way flight and kind of winging it once you get there.
I'm definitely one of the book a one-way flight and figure it out once you get there people. I mean, in that same vein, I think that there's a big difference between prepping and planning versus over planning everything. I think that preparation is a great idea and you need to be prepared with things like your embassy's phone number, and know that your cell phone is going to work in a foreign country, for instance. Have your credit cards all forms that you're going to be traveling. But I think that planning out every little thing really stresses me out.
Okay, so you were saying the types of things that you would research beforehand are your embassy's phone number, anything else?
The embassy phone number is a big one. I would research travel insurance to see a company that might work well for you. I would definitely let your loved ones back home know exactly where you are at all times. Maybe in general, just a little research into the safety of certain places, especially as a woman. But I don't think you need to get like so bogged down to the point where you're scared to even go.
I would say, like, for me, the things that I research about the country specifically that I'm going to, number one is like the weather and if it's tropical, if there's a rainy season. Because I think for me, I was like, okay, great. I want to go to, say, Thailand or Vietnam, but there's a huge monsoon season in like the summertime. And so if I'm going to go, I want to make sure that I choose a time when I'm not going to be spending the entire afternoon indoors because it's raining. And then I also just like to use that to inform kind of like how I pack and what kinds of activities I think I might want to do. Because if I think that there's a chance I might want to go on a hike or do something that's more like adventure travel, I want to make sure that I have athletic shoes or like athletic clothes with me as opposed to just normal travel clothes. But then, yeah, I still like to leave that room in the itinerary for doing something like spontaneous. I would say that I'm maybe more of a type A traveler than you are. Like, I get so excited by the actual planning process of a trip. Like, that to me is one of my favorite parts, is just picking out where do I want to go and then immediately looking at different travel blogs, like looking at the different articles on Travel Lemming and figuring out, okay, what are the best things to do here? And researching safety is a huge one because figuring out just, especially if it's a new country that you've never been to before, and maybe especially if you don't speak the language as well, just doing a quick research on like, what should I expect of different areas of the city? What are the areas that are really, really touristy that would be good because they might be a little safer, but also there might be more scams or tourist traps that I should expect versus what are the areas that are a lot more local, but maybe I need to be a little bit more prepared with my language abilities before going there. That can make a huge difference in your comfortability when you go to a new country. So yeah, researching neighborhoods, researching the weather, researching big festivals or special events. I think those are some things that can help you prepare without bogging you down into a strict itinerary.
Right. The language one is a good one too. I think no matter where you're going, if English isn't the primary language, or even if a lot of people do speak English, but it's not the native language there, learning a few key phrases in the language is super helpful. Even just thing as basic as thank you and hello can really get you very far. But if you want to take it a step further and be extra prepared, knowing how to say like help or I'm lost or where's the bathroom can come in very handy.
I agree so much. I love language learning, but even if it's not something that comes easy to you, I think it's really important when you're traveling to know, like you said, the basic phrases, but also it just shows that you're putting in a little bit more effort to learn the culture of the country you're in and you're not expecting everyone to just cater to you, especially if you're coming from a Western country where you only speak English. You're not going to somewhere else and expecting that everyone else is going to speak English there as well.
Today's episode is sponsored by Tortuga Backpacks. I took my 40-liter travel backpack light on a 6-day trip to Japan during the winter. So I was able to fit 6 days worth of clothing in there, including my bulkier winter wear like my thermals, a winter jacket, along with my laptop, a book, and an extra camera lens. With the hip and chest belts clipped, it didn't cut into my back and shoulders like I've experienced with other backpacks. Oh, and all of their bags are carry-on friendly, so they'll fit in the overhead bins of any airline. As a flight attendant, I was pleasantly surprised by the convenience of this backpack, especially because I'm someone who is so used to traveling with a suitcase. If you want to take along all the essentials for your travels and never have to worry about checking a bag or paying extra fees, check out Tortuga Backpacks. Click the link in the show notes to get 10% off your first order, or visit travellemming.com/Tortuga to pick your perfect pack today.
Okay, what are some common misconceptions about solo traveling as a woman that you think are out there?
I think the biggest one is that you have to be a specific type of person or at a specific phase in your life to do it. For instance, a lot of people think I have to make enough money to buy myself the privilege to solo travel, and they waste years and years and years not doing it. And then they get to the point and they're like, should have done it years ago, or vice versa. A lot of people think you can only really do this when you're young. Like that's when you're allowed to solo travel. But I think no matter who you are, your personality type, whether you're single, whether you're with someone, solo travel is for everybody. And anyone can get a lot of enjoyment out of the experience and learn a lot as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think so many people envision solo travel as like Julia Roberts' Eat, Pray, Love, of like to be at this big turning point in my life, or there has to be some big change that kind of shakes me into realizing that I need to solo travel. And like that can be a great impetus for going. And especially if it's your first solo trip, or I think just traveling resets you, especially solo traveling resets you in a way that can be really, really helpful after a major life change or major life event. But again, like you said, you can kind of do it at any time if you feel confident in your abilities. And even if you don't feel confident in your abilities, like saying, I know I want to do this, so I'm going to challenge myself. So it's just about making that decision that, hey, this is something I want to prioritize. Let's talk a little bit about solo traveling, even when you are in maybe a long-term relationship or you're married. A lot of people think that at that point, that's when you can't solo travel anymore. Like you have to now do everything with your partner. But I think that that's just not true at all, because even when you're in a long-term relationship, it's so helpful to have time to solo travel. I mean, one of our writers, Laura McFarland, wrote this really great piece on our website about couples doing their own individual solo trips and traveling separately. And she had this really great quote from a couples counselor named Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby, who says that there's nothing more detrimental to a healthy relationship than the mental, emotional, and psychological enmeshment where we have to do everything together. And that just like, I agree completely, because it's so nice. I've been traveling with a long-term partner now for the past year, and we did so many things together, but we also took time to build in our own solo travels in all of that. So like, for example, we were traveling around in Indonesia, and I really had this idea where I wanted to go work on a sailboat for a week and just sail around the Indonesian islands. And my partner gets really, really seasick, so she did not want to do that. And so I said, okay, that's fine. I'll do it myself. And I think that maybe some people in that circumstance would think, okay, if my partner doesn't want to do it, then I shouldn't do it. I'll just let that aside. But I think it's so helpful to just say, no, if you don't want to do it, that's okay. Are you okay if I go do it though? Because that just is going to be really healthy for your relationship and really healthy for yourself, and shows that you are able to prioritize your own wants and needs. And I had a great time sailing solo. I wrote a whole article about it on Travel Lemming, and it was a really, really fun experience. And so I'm really glad I did it. I think another major misconception about solo traveling as a woman is that only specific types of people can do it. Like you have to be an extrovert, you have to be really social. What do you think about that?
I think that traveling alone is actually one of the best things for introverts. I just wrote an article with Travel Loving about how I have anxiety, but I've traveled alone a lot. And obviously, a lot of people think that those two things don't go together. But I've found that traveling by myself is a good way, A, to learn how to cope with my anxiety, but also B, is like the most beautiful thing for an introvert ever, because I can do what I want when I want. When I want to talk to people, they're there to talk to, but really it's on my terms. And if I don't feel like doing something, I don't have to do something. So I really think it is an introvert's dream, so to speak. And I think that helps you figure out what you like to do. Like if you've only ever traveled with only people and other people and you've never been on a trip by yourself, it can be hard to figure out like what your thing is.
And I think it takes a few solo trips to figure out what your ideal travel vibe is. If you're listening and you're taking your first solo trip coming up and maybe it doesn't go as well as you'd hoped, try again, because the first time can definitely be rough. You're figuring out what type of traveler you are. You're figuring out what your priorities are when you're traveling and how to manage your time. But it does get easier the more you do it. And then the last major travel misconception that I want to talk about is that solo traveling is unsafe for women. How do you feel about that?
I feel like it's an unfortunate reality that women have to live with, is that we're just always in the back of our mind trying to keep ourselves safe. And to be frank, after traveling to over a dozen different countries, the vast majority of them by myself, I do not feel more unsafe traveling by myself than I do being by myself in the United States. And so I think really like there is always the big concern of like, I am by myself in a new country. I may not know other people that could just come in and save the day. As long as you're prepared, I think that it can be very safe for women. And you really just need to keep a good pound on your shoulders, be aware of your surroundings. And I think trust your gut is a huge one.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that the only major difference between safety abroad versus safety in the US can be like certain cultural customs or the language barrier. And so in certain countries, in order to maybe prioritize my safety a little bit more, I will like cover up more, especially if it's a local custom. If it's a country, especially if it's a Muslim country that I'm traveling to, it's polite to maybe cover my hair or cover more of my body. That doesn't bother me, especially if it's something that's going to make me feel like a little bit more safe and that I can blend in a little bit more and not draw attention to myself. And again, be polite to the local customs. I think that The biggest tips for safety are just making sure that people know where you are, making sure that you have a point of contact at your accommodation that you can get their phone number and like call them if something goes wrong, just so that you know you have someone in the country who can vouch for you if you're in a sticky situation.
And if you do ever get into one of those situations abroad where you're just not feeling comfortable, say something, be rude, be loud. Like, I wouldn't recommend always being rude, obviously, but if you're in a situation where you think your life might be in danger as a woman, be rude about it. Don't let someone come take advantage of you. I think that if your gut is telling you something is wrong, put up those blinders and make sure you get out of it by any means necessary. I think that my next tip would be to figure out your phone situation in advance. A lot of phone services these days, while they will let you use roaming in a foreign country, it can be very expensive. So I definitely prefer I used to do local SIM cards where I'd buy one once I got there, but these days I do the eSIM card. And the only thing to know about that is that your phone has to be unlocked to use it. And this is something that you can call your phone provider and figure out if your phone is locked or not. So there's apps you can use. I use an app called Ubigi, Ubigi, and it basically has eSIMs available for pretty much all over the world. I first discovered it on my Japan trip last year, and I've since used it the whole time that I've been in the UK and also in Canada. So basically, you go on there, you pick your country, you pick your plan. It's very easy.
Another big tip that I think I have for solo female travelers especially is to always read reviews. I mean, Betty wrote this really great article about reading reviews for different accommodations that she stayed in. It's up on our website. You can go check it out. But yeah, she just talks about how the first times that she solo traveled, she would book the cheapest accommodation available without looking at the different reviews of it and just being like, oh my gosh, this is such a great deal. But then she was in all these situations where she maybe felt unsafe or it was really loud or it was unclean. And so I agree completely. I think you always have to read accommodation reviews before you book. And speaking of booking accommodation, I think that it's also really helpful to, if you want to plan a lot in advance, book accommodation that does give you a refund if you decide to cancel. Because like you were saying, that just allows you to be a little bit more flexible with your travel plans. And so what websites do you use to book accommodation typically, Sky?
So I think that if you're looking for a hotel, booking.com is a really great one because they often have accommodations that have free cancellation. It's just something you need to check out when you're booking. If you are booking hostels, I use Hostel World a lot of the time. Or if you're in Asia, Agoda is a great one and often has cheaper prices than on some of the Western sites. But most of those sites will do free cancellation within a certain time period. So it does definitely give you a lot more leeway.
Yeah. And sometimes I know on booking, you might need to pay a slightly higher rate in order to have free cancellation, but it's usually like $5 extra a night, which for me is worth it, especially if I'm booking months in advance and I don't really know how much my travel plans are going to change. That is something that I will bite the bullet and take the extra cost just to have that flexibility. How do you feel about travel insurance? Is that something that you invest in before you're going to travel abroad?
Yes, I'm definitely a travel insurance girly. I love travel insurance. I've bought it before every trip I've ever gone on, mainly just for peace of mind. I like knowing that if anything does go wrong, there is an avenue that I can go down to get my money back or help me get home or anything else that I need. Luckily, I've never had to file a claim with my travel insurance, but I still like having it and having the protection of it on every trip I go. And really, travel insurance is very cheap. I think similarly to putting in the extra investment to get a cancelable accommodation, travel insurance should be viewed in the same way where it's like, well, I'm taking this trip for a month or 2 months. I think my travel insurance to the UK was like $45 or something. In the grand scheme of thing, that can save you so much money if you lose your luggage or you get sick or hurt or need to go home quickly. So I definitely think it's worth it.
I do buy travel insurance. I think it just gives me a little bit more peace of mind because I buy travel plus medical insurance. And so for me, knowing that I have an avenue where if I get injured abroad, I do have medical insurance that will cover me, just especially if I'm doing any kind of like adventure travel things or stuff where I might get hurt doing whatever I'm going to do. It's really nice to know that you have an option to get your hospital bills like paid for. When you are traveling, what kind of accommodation do you like to stay in as a solo female traveler?
I think, especially if it's your first trip and you're feeling nervous about not having any friends or not having anyone to travel with, that hostels are the way to go. It is an automatic friend zone. You will always meet someone at a hostel. It's very easy to socialize. Even if you're not a super social person, I wouldn't call myself a social butterfly, but hostels is maybe the easiest place to make friends that I've ever been. Then I think hotels is the next best choice, because while I do like Airbnb and I have stayed at Airbnbs all over the world, it's just a little iffier when you're a solo female traveler. And not even necessarily because the Airbnb is going to be weird or whatever, but if they cancel last minute, which is a possibility, or anything like that, it's just a way bigger hassle to deal with by yourself.
I agree. I definitely tend to book all female dorms at hostels. Usually it'll be the same price as a mixed dorm, which is really, really nice. And you just know that you have a room that's only women are allowed in that room, which helps a little bit if you're feeling nervous about like safety, or if you just want a place to come back and like change after a shower and not feel like a little weird about the other people in that room. Okay. Sky, what are your favorite parts about solo traveling?
By far, my most favorite part about solo traveling is that I can do whatever I want and I don't really have to compromise with anyone else about what I'm going to do, what I'm going to see, what I'm going to eat. I think that the freedom is really one of the best parts of solo travel by far. It outweighs all of the bad parts in my mind, or potential bad parts.
I agree. The freedom is just unmatched because, again, like we talked about, you don't have to wake up and think, what does everyone else around me want to do today? You only have to think, what do I want to do today? And that's a really rare feeling in your life.
It's like a powerful feeling to just have control of the whole day, week, trip, whatever it is. And I think it teaches you a lot about yourself, as we've already touched on a little bit. It like gives you more insight into your likes and dislikes. And it also can just, I think for me, added to like a lot of confidence, made me feel super secure in my ability to take care of myself. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits.
I always tell myself, like, I am the only person that's going to be with me my entire life. Like, I have to deal with me from the moment I was born until the moment I die. And so I better like my own company. And solo travel has taught me so much about how to enjoy my own company.
That's very, very accurate. I'm actually an only child, so I've been like very familiar with the feeling of being alone and enjoying my own company for a long time. That might be why I like solo travel so much. But I agree that it definitely teaches you how to be comfortable being by yourself, which I think is a lesson that a lot of people struggle to learn or scared to learn, because it is nerve-wracking to be by yourself, but it's super, super valuable.
What are some other things that you think it has taught you, like in terms of maybe more hard skills?
I think a big one is that it improves your navigational skills and just like your ability to get around in a new place when you're just kind of dropped somewhere and you have to figure out, okay, how do I take the train system? How am I going to get from point A to point B? You only have yourself to rely on. It really hones in those skills. I think it helps you learn to trust your intuition and trust your gut and develop that sense in yourself so that you can be a better traveler in the future and keep yourself safe as you travel.
The feeling of navigating a public transportation system in a brand new city, I feel like the king of the world. I'm like, I have done it. I can get anywhere I want to. Like, I am so smart that I figured out the subway system.
No, I feel that. And it does take effort. It is a whole thing to like learn that. I think that that's a harder skill than a lot of people give it credit for. And it can be really overwhelming, especially if you're in a place where English isn't the first language. I know that when I got a handle on the Japanese public transportation system, I also was like, I'm the king of the world. I am ruling this.
Yeah, completely. I think also another really great part about solo travel is that you do make these connections, especially if you're staying in hostels where you're trying to be social and you're trying to meet new people. You make connections with people that you probably wouldn't talk to if you were traveling with a group. Like if you just stuck with your friend or your partner, you might not branch out and talk to as many people as you do when you're really forced to if you're a solo traveler.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been on a lot of trips with friends at this point, and then obviously also by myself, and incomparable. I feel like I don't meet anyone when I'm traveling with friends. And even if I go into the trip thinking we're going to meet friends, it's so much harder for some reason than when you're traveling by yourself. I think that there's just a little more like closed offness when you're with a group as opposed to by yourself. I think as an adult, actually traveling alone is one of the easiest ways to make friends in a world where it is so difficult to make adult friends.
So now that we've talked about the best parts of solo travel, what are some of the worst parts of solo travel?
I think a big one is that it can get lonely, and there is this sense of not having anyone to share the memories with when you're traveling with a significant other or friends. You're all making memories together, and that's palpable. But when you're by yourself, even if you're doing a million cool things, it can kind of feel like, but I'm still alone. And there is a loneliness to that. But I think if you can own that and be like, no, this is cool. This is an experience for just me. And that's a cool thing, that it's a good way to turn it on its head and turn it into a positive.
Yeah. And there is something to be said about the memories that you share with maybe friends that you've made on your solo travel. And we'll talk about how to make friends while solo traveling in a little bit. But on that topic, what are some things that you like to do to make yourself feel a little bit more safe while you're traveling?
One of the big ones, I think, and is something that you could deal with in the planning stage, is to make sure that your flights are arriving in a new place, and even your trains, if you're traveling within a country, during the day. Even in the safest place, arriving at night, I just feel like I can't get my bearings in the same way as when I arrive in the morning or the afternoon. I have a full day of light. Everything is kind of copacetic. I think that's a big one and can be really helpful to making you feel more comfortable in a new place. Another big one is watching your drinks at the bar. I think that this is something that most women have been hearing their entire lives, but it's especially important when you're traveling, especially if you're going somewhere. There's a lot of destinations that partying is a big part of why people go there. And it can be fun and it's a good time. And I've definitely had my fair share of partying, but I think that when you're traveling alone as a woman, it's not the time to get super, super drunk or super intoxicated by any means. And to always keep an eye on your drink, because you are at more risk in that situation.
Yeah. Which again, like I hate that we have to think about that as like, well, I just will not get super drunk, because that's not your fault if you
Right.
do and something happens to you. That's not your fault, but it is a
I mean,
precaution.
even just as simple as, you don't even have to be targeted, but if you get super drunk and let's say you trip and hurt yourself in the middle of the night, or you
Yeah.
end up somewhere and you
True.
don't know what's going on, there's a lot of situations that can happen that you just don't have, if you're not being able to think to your full capacity, it's more dangerous, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I think another big one is that when you're out and about and you meet people, you can feel like you're building a connection with someone really fast, but you do need to keep in mind this is still a stranger. You don't necessarily know everyone's true intentions. So I would recommend not giving out the name of where you're staying to anyone unless you super, super trust them, because you don't want someone popping up at your accommodation. You don't know what they could have planned. It's just better to keep your accommodation secure and for yourself. And I think another big one is, when you're out exploring and if you do want to partake in a place's party lifestyle, party atmosphere, to go with a group from your hostel, because that could really limit the risk. And also then, we go out together, we come back together, you'll have people that you're all going in a pack, and it just makes things feel more secure and safer, and just more people, power numbers.
Yeah. Just because you're solo doesn't mean that you can't find a buddy and really latch on in a
Right.
situation where you maybe want to feel a little bit more safe.
Definitely.
Let's talk a little bit about packing for your first solo trip as a woman. What kind of stuff are on your packing essentials list, no matter where you go?
I think it's pretty similar to most general packing lists, especially if you know the destination that you're going to. A few main things that I always tend to bring is a laundry bag to put all my dirty clothes, and definitely a laundry day outfit for when you use up all your clothes. I think that layers are super important, because even if you're going somewhere that it's hot and night, it can get colder, or like you were talking about earlier, there's different seasons. And if you're in somewhere during the rainy season, might be really hot during different parts of the day, but then it pours and you're freezing. So layers are very good. I think another big thing to know about packing as a solo traveler is being very wary of overpacking, because, it might be okay to pack everything under the sun when you're going on a group trip, but you are the only person who's going to be carrying your backpack. Nobody can help you close your bag. And it can really be draining to carry around a bag that's too heavy, especially when it's full of a bunch of stuff that you didn't actually need.
Yeah, we have a few different tips for packing for full-time travel on our website. So whether you're packing for a few weeks trip, or if you're packing for a year-long trip, that's a piece that I wrote, is how I packed for a full year of travel and what I put in my backpacks and everything. But if you're curious about our packing lists, we have a ton of articles on Travel Lemming that you can check out. I also think that something to keep in mind if you're someone who does get periods is to pack tampons or pads with you, because some countries might not have as easy access to them. So if you are someone who does get a period, like maybe pack your tampons or whatever menstrual products you use like in advance just to have enough while you're there.
Yeah, I agree with that. They can be pretty hard to find some places, or it might just not be what you're used to. I think also reusable period products can be very helpful for travelers, especially if you're going on a long-term trip somewhere that these things aren't super accessible. So like period panties or like a Diva cup or something like that can be much easier than like packing months worth of tampons into your bag.
My last tip for stuff to bring would be a portable charger. I don't know, Sky, do you bring a portable charger with you when you go
Absolutely.
places?
I definitely love having the portable charger. I think that even when you're just out for like a full day, the phones die so quickly. It's such a hassle to
Yeah.
figure out somewhere to charge it, especially if you're relying on it for GPS. It's just better to know, like, I have a full extra 2 battery lives with me in the form of a portable charger
Yes.
rather than just, oh God, my phone is dying. What am I going to do? So definitely love portable chargers.
Yeah, it makes me feel so much safer to know that I will be connected to wherever I am and not gonna have I just don't wanna get stuck with a dead phone while I'm traveling alone.
Definitely.
Let's talk a little bit about money and budgeting for a solo travel trip because sometimes a solo travel trip, there's this misconception that in order to afford to travel by yourself, you have to be really rich or have a trust fund or have, life savings that you use. But there's really, really easy ways to budget travel. I know, I personally, one of the ways that I afforded to travel was that I did work exchanges. So I used a program called Workaway where I stayed with different people and helped out on farm work, childcare. That summer camp that I taught at in Croatia was completely a volunteer experience, so I wasn't paying for any food or accommodation while I was there. And so doing volunteer trips like that can really be a huge way to ease the cost of solo traveling. And it's really fun because you get to meet people as well. And so stuff like that, or World Packers is another really good program where you can work in hostels. And these work for maybe more long-term trips. So if you're hoping to travel or backpack around for a few months at a time, I would definitely recommend using Workaway or World Packers or some kind of volunteer exchange to relieve the cost of your accommodation and food. But Sky, what other tips do you have for budget traveling?
I think another few ways that if you aren't trying to do the work program but still save money and budget while you're solo traveling, obviously a hostel is going to save you tons of money. A bed in a hostel is so much cheaper than a hotel. But also, I think that another one of the most expensive parts of traveling is probably the food, eating 3 times a
Mhm.
day. One of the ways that I try to lower the cost of that is by eating in more local neighborhoods away from tourist hotspots and also eating the local food while I'm there because while it sounds obvious, like, oh, I'm in Italy, I'm going to eat Italian food, it can get to be a lot of Italian food after a while, but it will always be much cheaper if you're eating the local food of the place that you are visiting. And that's a great way to
Yeah.
keep costs down. If you really, really are on a budget, you can buy groceries and make them at your hostel. Usually, most hostels have a kitchen area that you can use
Mhm.
yourself and make your own meals. So that can save a lot of money.
That is one of my favorite ways to save money is I always eat breakfast at my hostel. So I will buy a tub of yogurt for the week and a thing of berries, and I just have berries and yogurt in the morning, and then I'm only paying for lunch and dinner. But yeah, I think just cooking, trying to make at least one meal in your hostel kitchen and buying groceries is gonna save so much money, especially if you're doing a longer trip.
Yeah, definitely. I also think that just the simple task of building yourself a daily budget and knowing this is how much money I have to allot to the day can be super helpful because when you're just spending money willy nilly and then you go back to see how much you spent, it's almost always more than you intended to. But if you have that budget goal, then usually I find that I stay under it when I set a budget goal for myself for the day.
One of the other parts of solo travel that can get exhausting is trying to make new friends all of the time, but it can also be one of the parts that is the most rewarding. So, how do you make friends when you're solo traveling?
So there's a few ways. My first go-to is always staying in a hostel. I found that this is one of the easiest ways. Even the first hostel I ever stayed at, I was walking past another girl. We just kind of made eye contact, clicked, and then by the afternoon of that day, we were flying to a different city to meet a bunch of other girls. So it really can just happen as quickly as that, as you pass someone in the hostel. You both know you're solo travelers and you're looking for friends. And I think that's why it's such a great environment to meet other people. If you're not staying in a hostel, I think that group tours are a great way to go as a solo traveler. When I was in Japan, I went on this group tour to Mount Fuji. I actually wrote an article about it for Travel Lemming. And while I was there, I met this woman from Sweden who I never would have really connected with, I think, if I wasn't on this trip by myself. But we really did, and we were chatting the whole time, and it was such a nice experience. So I think group tours are another big one.
Let's talk a little bit about social hostels versus party hostels. Now, there is a difference, correct?
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Can you explain what a party hostel is and what your thoughts are on party
Sure.
hostels?
So a lot of cities will have these places that won't be necessarily straight up say, we are a party hostel, we will be partying all night. But it'll be clear when you like look at some of the reviews and you look at some of the photos that these places are meant to be more social and party hostels. Basically, what I've found that just means is usually there's a bar in the hostel and they do drink specials or they play games or they have social events around drinking and partying. And they're usually very loud throughout the night, but also very fun if you're in the mood for that type of environment. I just think you need to go into it aware, because if you go to a party hostel thinking, I'm going to get a great night's sleep for my trip tomorrow, that will not
No.
happen.
Yeah, like a really popular branch of party hostels around Southeast Asia are Mad Monkey. Have you ever stayed in a Mad Monkey?
I've stayed in like one or two a couple times. They're definitely intense, but I think that if you go in there and you're like, I'm ready to party, it's a great time.
Yeah, it can be a really good time, but again, just knowing what to expect. So if you want the social aspect, but you're like, party hostels sound way too intense for me, there are also just normal social hostels. And now the thing that I have found for how to search for like the perfect social hostel is when you go on a site, you can again read the reviews and figure out what people are saying. Of like, a lot of times people will say, this is a pretty quiet hostel and everyone pretty much keeps to themselves. Or they'll say, this hostel is great. They host like yoga on Monday mornings. They host a wine and cheese night every Wednesday. They do karaoke on Fridays. And getting a sense of if there's some kind of weekly calendar of events and if people are going to those things, that is a great way to make friends in a very chill environment that's not as intense as a party hostel, but still is like a hostel that has activities going on. And a lot of times, some of the best advice about how you're going to format your trip comes from people that you meet in hostel. So I've met people that have influenced me to go to places that I wouldn't have gone to before talking to them.
Yeah, I've found the exact same thing. Some of my favorite things that I've ever done were recommendations from other travelers. Like, for instance, I did the Hajing Loop in Vietnam, had never heard of it before I went to Asia, and then so many people were recommending it that I was like, have to go there. Nusa Penida Island off the coast of Bali was another one that I had never heard of before I got there. And then so many people were like grabbing my shoulders, being like, no, you need to go there while you're here. And I it did not disappoint at all. They were telling the truth. It was gorgeous there.
All right. Now that we're kind of done with our tips and tricks section, we're going to wrap this up by just talking about some of Sky and I's favorites. So we're going to first start with our favorite countries that we've been to for solo travel. Sky, what are your top 5?
My top 5 countries for solo travel are Japan, Vietnam, Italy, Thailand, and Spain. So I'm going to go and give a little more detail on each of those. I think Japan is perfect for if it's your first solo trip and you really want to go somewhere that's completely different from where you grew up or live, but is super safe and easy to get around as a foreigner. That's Japan to the nth degree. There is so many things to do there and so many things to see that you could never get, for instance, living in the US, but it's also very easy to get around. Vietnam is a similar vibe. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best for a very first-time traveler because it can be very chaotic, especially like the streets with the motorbikes and everything, but it's insanely cheap. So this is one of my top picks for like budget travelers because seriously, I stayed in hostels that were like giving me free breakfast and doing like the social events, like you said, for no joke, like $3 a night. So Vietnam is beautiful for budget travelers. Italy, it's one of my top choices in Europe for the food. It's easy to get around. There's very iconic cities in Italy. So if you're looking for somewhere to check out some bucket list items, I think Italy is a top place. I think we both said Thailand is a great place for solo travelers. And anyone who's been there as a solo traveler can tell you Thailand is the spot. There's a million hostels. Also, once again, very budget friendly. Such a wide range of things to do for whatever you're into. There's lots of gorgeous beaches, There's amazing nature. There's lots of animals. It's just an incredibly beautiful place and also very easy to get around and easy to get around the region from there. And the last place I have on there is Spain. And I have a very fond place in my heart for Spain. I think that, once again, this is one of those places that has something for everything. If you go to the south of Spain, it's going to be very different than the north of Spain. And
Mm.
there's places that are more party oriented, like Barcelona, and there's much more chilled places. Like I loved Sevilla. So yeah, Spain is gorgeous. Also, the food is incredible.
The variation in Spain, it's not just landscape variation, but cultural variation too, because you have Catalonia, where Barcelona is, and then you also have Basque country up north, right?
It really differs from place to place. You can like feel the cultural differences when you're like in the coast in Catalonia, like you said, versus like if you're in the middle of the country in Madrid. And I think that's a really cool experience if you want to see a bunch of different cultures, but you don't want to go to a bunch of different countries.
Yeah, I agree completely. My top 5 places for solo traveling are Croatia, Slovenia, Thailand, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, Australia and New Zealand may be a little bit controversial because the countries are so big and there's not a super robust public transportation system around different regions. So you do kind of need a car to get around. But they do have really good bus systems and the cities are absolutely incredible. So, like, Sydney and Melbourne in Australia are really, really fun to be a solo person in. Super safe, super easy to get around. And there's so many good day trips and group tours that you can take from those cities. And then in New Zealand, it's just such an incredible and super safe place. Like, the people that I met that were comfortable hitchhiking were hitchhiking in New Zealand. So again, like, just very safe. There's no language barrier if you are coming from an English speaking country. So those two are really, really fun. Croatia and Slovenia both have very special places in my heart because they're the first places that I solo traveled. They're neighboring countries and there's really, really good buses and train systems around both of them, and many, many people speak English, and they're a little bit cheaper than a lot of Western European countries. And then finally, I do really agree with you about Thailand. I think it's one of the best places that you can solo travel. It has something for everyone, like you said, and it's just very safe. I felt very comfortable being there, and the culture is so different and unique and amazing than anything I've experienced before. Now, Sky, what are your top experiences from your time solo traveling?
One of my favorite solo traveling experiences was when I was in Italy. I did the Path of the Gods hike on the Amalfi
Ooh.
Coast. And this is something that I actually joined a tour for or a hiking group rather. It was pretty complicated to figure out how to get to this remote point of where the hike started by myself. And it was a gorgeous experience. It was actually the inspiration for me going to Italy in the first place, as I started seeing videos of this hike. And I was like, I need to be there. I want to do it. Definitely exceeded my expectations. It was the most gorgeous views of the Amalfi Coast. A lot of people think that the only way to see the Amalfi Coast is to get on a boat and see it from that side of things. But I think this was a totally different perspective. And I met a lot of really nice people while I was hiking, so it was super fun.
Oh, wow, that sounds incredible. One of my favorite experiences from solo traveling happened just last summer. I was traveling around the south of France by myself. France is one of my favorite countries to travel around. I've been there 4 times, and it's just, there's so much variety in the landscapes. But I love the south of France specifically, and I'd never been to Marseille before. And so I took a day trip from Marseille to Les Calanques National Park, which I feel like was a national park that really flew under the radar. I had never heard of it before, and I was looking up things to do in Marseille, and I was like, okay, great. It's only a 2-hour train ride away. Like, I'll just go for the day. And I had the most incredible hike where I just bought a bunch of fruit and a baguette, and I stuffed it all in my backpack and was hiking along these beautiful granite cliffs overlooking this like turquoise blue water and just like all these little inlets and coves with tiny little beaches. And I just ended up spending the whole day swimming and soaking in the sun and eating my apricot and my peaches. And it was just like, I had never felt happier. And so that was one of my favorite experiences.
That's a good spot. Whenever there's like, it's not very well known and you could just have like a private experience by yourself, that's always a good time. Another great solo traveling experience I had was when I was in Chiang Mai, Thailand. I went to one of the ethical animal rescues. Just to be clear, this is not one of the places where they let you ride the elephants. These are places where they've rescued the elephants. So I did a lot of research into making sure that that's what this place was.
Mhm.
It was such a beautiful experience. They were so serious about keeping the elephants comfortable that we actually had to change into like the outfits that the local people who took care of them were wearing. So they weren't like, who are these people? And we basically just
Yeah.
hung out with them.
And in their natural habitat too, in a way
Yeah.
that sounds relatively comfortable for them. Like, it's so important to research the ethical, like conservation rehabilitation centers and not just places that are doing it for tourism and for profit. One of my favorite travel experiences was doing my working holiday visa in Australia. So this is a visa that you can get if you're between the age of 18 and 35 and you're from the US. You can just sign up for a working holiday visa, and it usually comes within, for me, it came within like a day. And it allows you to go to Australia and live there for a year and do odd jobs. So I worked in a hostel, I did some farm work, and it basically allows you to, this is a really great way to fund your travels while you're in the country because you are allowed to get jobs there. And I had such an amazing time. I lived in Sydney for 2 months. I traveled up the east coast of Australia. I lived in Melbourne for 2 months and went to the Australian Open and worked in a hostel above a beer garden and just got free beer and salads every day and just like cleaned the hostel. And then I also went over to Western Australia and hung out in Perth for a little bit. And so I just completely fell in love with the Australian continent. Seeing kangaroos every day was like incredible, just awesome. I saw 2 koalas in the wild. Like,
Oh my God.
it is such a unique country with such a fun culture and so many amazing wildlife. Oh, and Tasmania. Tasmania really flies under the radar, but I loved my trip to Tasmania when I was in Australia. So I think Australia as a whole was just one of those places that was really, really influential to me.
That's a good one. I've heard great things about the working holiday visa. It is one of the best ways that if you just want to go and go somewhere for a year and know that you're allowed to stay there, I think it's an amazing way to do that. Another one of my favorite travel experiences was, now this one might sound a little weird to a lot of people, but I have always been really into going to abandoned places and taking photos. It is something that a lot of people are like, oh, okay. So before I went to Bali and like Southeast Asia in general, I was looking up abandoned places and I came across this abandoned theme park in Bali. And so I went there on my solo trip.
Oh my
It was
God.
incredible. One of the coolest abandoned places I've ever been to. So that was definitely a really cool experience. Obviously, that's so random, but that was a top one for me.
That sounds so interesting. And I think doing your hobbies while you're alone abroad is something that can connect you to home and kind of alleviate that feeling of homesickness. Like, I brought my crochet hook and a ball of yarn with me because anytime I was nervous and just needed to like do something with my hands, I just would like crochet and it would kind of calm me down. And I was like, okay, just because I'm super far away from home right now doesn't mean that I don't still have like some of the comforts of things that I would normally do if I'm just at home, like hanging out with my family or friends. So I think, yeah, like keeping your hobbies the same while you travel is really nice to kind of cure that homesickness.
Yeah, right. That's so valid. I journal. I do like journaling in the same places when you crochet.
One of my other favorite solo travel experiences was actually something that you mentioned doing, Sky, the Ha Giang Loop in Vietnam, which is a crazy 4-day motorbike loop through the mountains of northern Vietnam. It's the Tonkinese Alps that are kind of on the border of China and Vietnam. And you motorbike around, you're motorbiking for probably 5 or 6 hours a day, and you can either have someone else drive for you and you sit on the back of the motorbike, or you can drive your own. Now, Sky, which one did you do?
So I didn't go with an official tour. I rode on the back of someone else's motorbike who had more experience driving than me. So I had the comfort of not feeling like, oh, I have never driven a motorbike before, and now I'm in one of potentially the most dangerous places to do it. But I still got to do everything and have fun and not have like the strictness of joining a whole tour.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned that it's dangerous because honestly, these roads are no joke. Like, you are driving on these super, super windy roads high up in these cliffs, and it's stunning scenery. Like, easily, probably my favorite travel experience of all time, I think, and one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen with my own 2 eyes. And so it's really nice to know that you have someone else who is an experienced motorbike driver who is going to be driving you. So I would not recommend driving yourself personally unless you like have extensive experience driving motorbikes in Southeast Asia.
I agree with you that it's one of the most gorgeous places I've ever seen. Even now, after so many years of traveling, I always think back to there and I'm like, I think that might be the pinnacle.
That's so funny. I say the same thing. Where do you want to go solo travel next?
My to-do list for this year, I definitely want to go to South Korea. That's a big one for me. Last year I did Japan and it made me only want to go to South Korea even more. Also China in that same kind of region, I'm very interested in going to. And closer to Europe, I really want to go to Iceland.
I think my places that I want to go solo next, I've been seeing Sri Lanka on like a lot of different travel blogs, travel websites. I think that a lot of people are going to Sri Lanka now. And so I do really want to go before it kind of
Blows up.
gets really, really big
Yeah.
in tourism. But I think that it's such a unique culture there. Peru, I've been to South America once, but I only went to Argentina and Uruguay. And I would love to hike to Machu Picchu. So I think that that's
Same.
something I really do want to prioritize. Nate, our founder of Travel Lemming, talks a lot about how Georgia is one of his favorite countries in the world. And it has honestly influenced me to want to go to Georgia now. I think hiking in that region looks really spectacular. And then finally, I have spent some time traveling around Spain, but I am really wanting to prioritize walking the Camino at some point in the next few years of my life. I have heard such wonderful things about people that do that pilgrimage, whether from the Spanish side or from Portugal. Just doing a really long walk like that sounds very spiritual and cool and like grounding for me. So I think that's something I'm really excited to do in the future. So now that we've talked about some of our favorite travel experiences, can I ask what was that first impetus that like made you take the leap into solo traveling? What inspired you and gave you the confidence to do that?
Big part of it was just watching other people do it online. The more I looked into it, the more interested I became. Actually, in this whole process of where I was first thinking about going solo traveling, I came across this quote that really sealed the deal for me and changed my perspective a lot. It goes, and then there's the most dangerous risk of all, the risk of spending your life not doing what you want on the bet that you can buy yourself the freedom to do it later. And that really,
Mhm.
really inspired me because I pictured myself maybe like 40 or 50 years old, had never traveled anywhere, and then was first trying to do it because I had spent so long trying to have enough money for it.
That's a wonderful quote, and yeah, just really hits hard in terms of you don't want to live life with any regrets, and so if you want to do something, you should just do it now. I think my impetus for solo traveling is very similar to yours. I just was in college and I knew that I wanted to see the world. Like I just had this huge desire to get out and see everything and do everything I possibly could. And so when I found this volunteer program in Croatia, I just applied without a second of hesitation. I just was like, yeah, I'll apply and see what happens. And just taking that first step into looking into things and making it real was so huge in order for me to get over this hump of like, oh, but I have to have a lot of money to do that. Or, oh, but I have to wait until the perfect time. Like, no, I just started looking into it and then I was like, all right, I'll just go. It wasn't even a question in my mind. So that was something that was really powerful for me and just opened up this whole world of like, oh, I have free will.
Yeah.
Yeah. Has anything ever gone wrong for you while you were solo traveling, and how did you go about fixing that?
I wouldn't say I've had any major blunders, but I've definitely had plenty of little hiccups along the way. One story that comes to mind is that on my very first day by myself in Thailand, I woke up, I had stayed in an Airbnb, but my Airbnb host had left for the day. And I was trying to go get a cab to my next hostel, and I couldn't figure out how to open the door of this guy's apartment. It turned out you had to like press a button on the wall to open it. But as an American, it just isn't a thing that would exist. And I was like trying to open this door and I'm trying to like look at my phone at where the taxi is. And then I finally got outside and my taxi didn't speak any English. And I'm trying to tell him where I am. He couldn't find me. And I ended up solving the situation by basically running up to some random guy in the street and handing him my phone and being like, taxi. He told the guy on the phone where we were. He found me. Everything was fine. But in the moment, I was like, oh my God, I like was attached to this guy's Wi-Fi.
Yeah, sometimes you can rely on the kindness of strangers.
Yeah.
Same thing happened for me in terms of relying on the kindness of strangers. I had rented a van to travel up the east coast of Australia, and on day 2 of my camper van trip, I woke up to a flat tire and was like, I honestly don't know how to deal with this. Like, I didn't really know how to fix a flat tire, and so luckily there was a very nice man in the campsite next to me with his family who offered to help, and they were from Belgium, so they only spoke Flemish, and so we were doing this, like, hand gesturing communication of, like, "Okay, how do we change this tire? How do we patch it?" Like, all this stuff, and eventually the whole campground pitched in to, like, help me change this tire, and it was just honestly really fun and really nice,
That
but
sounds kinda
definitely a panic
wholesome.
moment. It was super wholesome, but definitely a panic moment at first of like, "Oh my god, it's day 2 of my road trip and I've already have a flat, like,
Yeah.
what?"
That hand gesture communication can get you very far, a lot farther than some people think.
Yes, exactly. Well, final question before we depart for today. Sky, I just wanna ask, how has traveling alone changed you?
Traveling alone has changed me in so many ways. I think the very first thing I noticed is that I was way more confident in myself and confident in my self-reliance specifically. There's just something about going to a new place by yourself, navigating the whole trip, doing what you need to do. by the end of it, like we've touched on a little bit, you really feel like you can do anything and handle anything. And that's something that I've definitely carried with me since. I also think it's made me a lot more open to new experiences. I was always pretty open-minded and kind of down for trying new things, but really pushed me out of my comfort zone to the point where now I'm really just ready to try something. As long as it sounds like pretty much safe for me, I want to try it. But I also think there's a few negative impacts that's had. For instance, I think I've become more difficult to please, especially in the fact that I prefer solo traveling to group traveling at this point, and I almost prefer my own company. But it also is kind of a benefit.
I think it just shows that kind of growth that can happen when you solo travel is that you do get so much more comfortable with yourself, but sometimes you go too far into that like hyper independent space where I've definitely had the same thing where I'm like, okay, I know that I love to do things on my own, so now I would rather do that instead of sharing it. And sometimes you do need to take a step back and be like, okay, I still want to travel with friends. Like it's
Right.
important to prioritize that as well.
Yeah.
Solo travel for me has made me so much more confident in my ability to do things on my own, even at home. And so now when I was in high school or college, the thought of going to a concert by myself was like terrifying to me of just like, oh, what will people think? People will think I have no friends. People will be like, what a weirdo. Why is she here by herself? And now, after solo traveling so much, it doesn't even cross my mind as any kind of question. It's like, if I want to go do something and I can't find anyone else that wants to do it with me, I will go do it no matter what. Now I live in San Francisco and I've gone to see ballets by myself. I've gone to the symphony by myself. I go to concerts by myself all the time. I go to little like bookshops and just read in the library. Like it is so fun to take yourself out on little adventures. And solo traveling kind of opens up that door of like, hey, I don't have to wait for someone to want to do this with me. I can just do it because I want to. And no one is going to think weird of it. No one is going to look twice at you for being alone. Like you can go out to eat by yourself. You can go to a cafe. You can do whatever you want by yourself.
Totally. That is such a good point. I think that when you travel by yourself, you really start to realize like nobody cares what you're doing in like a positive way. Everyone's kind of caught
Yeah.
up in their own world and like, you know, nobody has time to worry about you eating alone at a restaurant or going to a concert by yourself. They're like too focused on themselves. And that's kind of a very freeing mentality.
It is completely. Well, Sky, this has been such a wonderful conversation about solo female travel. I mean, I'm inspired by all of your experiences, and I can't wait to see what you do next and where you go next.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a fun chat. And it was such a joy to hear your solo travel experiences as well. I love hearing other people's experiences too.
Yeah, before we go, I do just want to give another quick shout out to Tortuga Backpacks for sponsoring this episode. They are wonderful. Definitely go check them out if you can and if you're in the market for a good travel backpack. I also want to plug, we have a lot of great episodes on our podcast. Betty and Nate just did a really great episode about traveling to Europe as an American. So what to know, when to go, and how to plan. So that's a really, really great episode for anyone who's listening to this and thinking that maybe they want to solo travel to Europe. If you are American, definitely check that podcast episode out. It'll have a lot of great tips and tricks for you. But that's it for today on the Travel Lemming podcast. Once again, I am your host, Laura. I was joined here today by Sky. Thank you so much for listening and see you next time.